My early influences were things like the music that was on cartoons and on TV, and I guess maybe film music to some extent, and very much computer game and video game music. With Sonic the Hedgehog, I guess Mario to a certain extent, Doom, Streets of Rage, the music to Rugrats, which a lot of it was done by Mark Mothersbaugh, who is obviously, he was in Devo, and he's he's become quite a sort of quirky and interesting, almost avant-garde composer in terms of his soundtrack work. One of the major things that was influential on me was the animation Aeon Flux, which was eventually turned into a awful movie which bore no resemblance to it whatsoever. But interestingly, the composer for that movie was Graham Revell, who used to be in a very good industrial band in the 80s called SPK. But the cartoon was absolutely brilliant. The cartoon was completely avant-garde on every level, and the music was composed by a guy called Drew Newman. And musically speaking, all of that stuff I was talking about stuff in the 90s, particularly cartoons having soundtracks that were like, they weren't pop music, they weren't classical, but they were almost sort of quite sort of high-minded, quirky, eccentric, modern composition. His was like really the epitome of that sort of thing. When I was at university, when I was 18, I was getting into industrial music, I was getting into black metal quite heavily. I started working on what was my sort of first serious sound pieces, which is what kind of became Master Taurus, and it was all sort of weird, sort of Dadaistic sound collages using tapes, and it ended up evolving into sort of something that was more avant-garde and involved like bits of classical music and the blues and sort of everything being smushed together. I kind of got into the mindset of thinking that the sound I was making was too weird and multi-layered to be performed live, so it took me something like maybe 10 years to start performing properly. General Harm is made to be more immediate and sort of maybe less complex, and to have more of a sort of an almost a punk rock, early industrial sensibility to it. If I want to do something, the best way to do it is to just do it straight away, or else it'll get put up on like the endless back burner while newer projects and ideas pile up on top of it, and then it never gets done. Flanzu, well, I met Callum F. Kerr, who is Tiger Gnome, in a forest in North London where we were doing a sort of an open air art exhibition type thing, and he was performing. And then later on, we had both joined this group called the A Band, who are kind of an old school, early 90s improv stroke noise collective. And he'd sort of obviously seen me doing things and seen me building things and what have you, and he sort of said, well, I have this idea to do this new project. And the initial idea was that it would be a bit like the A-Band but more organised, and from there it sort of developed and became something completely different and became very, very visual. It became something more involved. One of the ideas I've always had for my art was the idea of creating the total work of art, something that stimulates and provides some sort of thing for every possible sense and every possible way of experience a piece of art. So it's visual, it's movement, it's sound, it's performance, there's story, there's concepts, there's ideas, there's maybe even a philosophy to it. And Flanzu, among my projects, it kind of has, it definitely has a lot of that going on. There's definitely a story to it and an overarching sort of concept. We can be very silly, but there is actually often a serious message to it, which is about the apocalypse and about the idea of humanity destroying itself, essentially, broadly speaking. The idea of environmental collapse. and the way that nuclear technology has been used and things like that. Well, of course, there's Grimmates, which is brilliant and is very much about the music, and perhaps it has a performative aspect to it as well, but it's definitely less so than Flange Zoo, put it that way. Catboy was sort of birthed by my friend, the artist and musician and writer Tina Hibbins, who sadly died a number of years ago now. But she was really a person who transcended all sorts of different things, including gender and potentially even species. And she envisioned Catboy, or the Cat Meow as she originally called him, as being like her DJ assistant, and then he sort of evolved from there. But what Catboy ended up becoming was her second fiddle in her band, the Sapruder Nightmare, which was a long-standing project that she'd had since the 90s, and she'd done it with a couple of other duos and as a solo act and all sorts of things, and then she asked me to join one day. I said that was Catboy's original thing, and after she died, it became a sense that we had so much sort of unfinished creative business that I had to create some sort of project to continue with that and to expand her legacy, musically speaking, in terms of what she created and what she set in motion. So that became, because the Sapruder Nightmare TZN was very much her thing, something that Tina had worked with for so many years, we thought like we couldn't do that, so it became Tulpa's Own Nightmares, keeping the same initials, but obviously being very different. And it sort of it expands on her legacy in terms of the songs that we wrote together and concepts that we had spoken about doing. And so this is a very much it's a song orientated band, but it's also quite experimental, and there's some freeform elements to it, and often the membership is completely rotating. But the idea of it at the core is that you become your tulpa. Your tulpa is like a thought form that you create and you push out into the world. And so Catboy is my tulpa, and if you join Tulpa's Own Nightmares, you have to sort of you have to create something like that for yourself in order to perform with us, I guess. So it has that sort of philosophical, spiritual element, but also the very much a thing of a sort of being like basically a post-punk band and having songs and what have you. The goat is not really graphic design or anything like that. It's a photography project. I take the goat everywhere with me. I'm going to get the goat out. I'll show you the goat. This is the goat. A famous goat who I take everywhere with me, more or less. It's always in my pocket. And I sort of take photos of the goat on various different things and in various different scenarios, and it's just a sense that because of the fact that it's quite realistic but also quite small, it has a sense that it sort of distorts your sense of space and the different sizes of different things, and I just like it. There's Grimmates. We hopefully this year we're having what will be our third EP overall and second EP with me in the group. That might be happening, possibly. And I've got a new Vaporwave project. Over the last few years, Vaporwave has been sort of like, in terms of the stuff that I actually listen to at home, it's like the major part of it. It's something that I got really fascinated by on like a conceptual level, and that drew me into the music and into making it. I have a project now with Cos Chapman from the Rude Mechanicals and various other bands and projects, which will be called Night Screen, and it's broadly going to be like a vaporwave or hypnagogic pop type thing, but instead of like sampling things, we're doing we're doing everything live or as live. And going into 2020, the A band have been on what was meant to be a 5-year break, sort of, but 2020 will be the band's 30th anniversary. I have not been in the band for 30 years, but that was like, they started it effectively in 1990. They're originally from Nottingham. They started up again when a whole bunch of them ended up being in London at the same time. They started up again essentially, and then a few years after that I joined, and I've done a few different releases with them, and there's ideas for more releases. We have like just a ridiculous amount of different recordings from different shows that need to be released, but 2020 will be our 30th anniversary, and something will have to happen about that, like maybe a tour or something like that. So part of this year we'll actually be planning what happens for that, but otherwise there's going to be more Vaporwave, there's going to be more Grimmates, Tulpa's Own Nightmares will return. We've taken a little bit of a break. Chunkatini we've already done one show this year. We will do more shows. Maybe we'll release something, I don't know. If you want us to see my main like Bandcamp stuff, if you put in Black Iron Kisses, that is like another aspect to that international art thing project, is that there's a kind of record label of sorts. I found one Raymond Goodman once, and there are lots and lots of Phillip Goodmans in the world and online, but Phillip Raymond Goodman, I'm the only one from what I know. I'm the only one.
So